ATS presents The Realty Debate, powered by Tata Capital, with Manisha Natarajan.
Remember how excited we were as a nation to see the first swanky mall in our respective city. Air conditioned, spick and span, filled with beautifully dressed up windows and mannequins, foreign brands and Western fast food outlets. These were simply the place to shop and hang out. In fact, on weekends or during annual sales, the crowds would get too much. Now, fast forward 10 years. Some malls have gotten bigger and better, sure. But have the numbers of shoppers in malls gone up? Doubtful. In fact, research says of the 600 operational malls in the country, less than 10% or about 50 malls are doing well. And what's worrying? Even when crowded, the stores at the malls often struggle to bring in enough sales. Welcome everyone to the Realty Debate, which asks a very simple question. What's the future of malls in India? With me, people who know this business inside out. Pushpa Bector, Senior Vice President and Head Leasing and Mall Management, DLF Mall of India. Harminder Sani, Founder and Managing Director, Wazir Advisors. We also have with us C. Prabhakar, Director Gopalan Enterprises. Kaushika Madhavan, Partner Etikani India. Kumar Rajagopalan, Chief Executive Officer, Retailers Association of India. Anand Sundaram, Chief Executive Officer, Pioneer Properties Zone. And of course, with his unique perspective, as always, Sameer Jasuja, Founder and MD of Prop Equity. Now, the 5 big questions, gentlemen and lady, that I'm going to pose today. Number 1, are malls no longer the mecca of shopping in India? Number 2, is online and e-commerce the big reason for mall distress? Number 3, what differentiates a successful mall from a dying one? The 4th question we'll be asking on Realty Debate today, should developers even bother with building more malls in the country? And the last question, how many malls will survive the next 5 years? So, before I start my discussion, let's just look at what's happening in the mall space. More than 600 malls have come up in the last 10 years, with 100 plus malls having opened up in the last 24 to 30 months. So, imagine the maximum supply has been in the last 2.5 years. Even though mall absorption dropped in 2014 and in 2015, it's likely to end even lower. You've had these launches. We could actually historically see the lowest demand in supply of mall space in 2015. Now, this is another important point. No more than 1/4 of the malls in India make money. As many as half have shut down or remodeled themselves into office blocks, cinemas and even hospitals. And according to GLL, 1 in every 6 stores in the mall is empty. So, that's a big number. And another advisory firm, Beyond Square Foot, estimates that up to 25 malls have been shut or converted to other uses in just the past 2 years. So lots of data to talk about, but I think the first question is, and it should go to Pushpa Bector because she's around the corner to launch the largest mall in India or in Asia or in Southeast Asia? Pushpa.
In India.
In India, okay, all right. The numbers are so huge, I just stopped counting the zeros in terms of million square feet. So, do you really think that malls are still the mecca of shopping in India?
Well, you rightly asked this question, which kind of malls survive? I think the high quality malls which offer a differentiation to the catchment will survive. It's going to be tough. The mall developers and mall management has to really reinvent constantly. It's not going to be reinvention once in 3 years. The time span has reduced to every year. One needs to reinvent. So we are really moving into an era of shorter leases so that there are new brands for shoppers to come by and browse. And definitely a more friendly approach from the developer side and retailer side to omni-channel retailing, which means we need to understand what is omni-channel and what do people really want when they come in to shop in a mall. Are they coming in to browse? Can we convert them? And how can we make that conversion real by giving more experiential retailing? So in Mall of India, that's what we are doing. We are really focusing a lot on providing experiential retailing to consumers so that there's a differentiation vis-a-vis a simple brick and mortar shop window, rightly, like you said.
Okay, all right. But you haven't answered my question. Are they still the mecca of shopping in India or that's changing?
I do believe they are still the mecca of shopping in India. See, in India, the entire shopping experience has just about started.
Okay.
The largest retail outlay in the country is just opening. You know, the jury is out there. We do believe that you know, if given the right product mix, given the right tenant mix, given the fact that a customer can come in and browse for a whole day and not feel bored and yet find value, it is going to be the Mecca for a while to come. Yes, the going is going to be tougher, no doubt about it. But to say that it's no longer the Mecca, well, I don't agree with that.
Okay, Harvinder Sani, would you agree or would you disagree? You know, this is the term Mecca of shopping. It had, I mean, before anything else happened, let's not even say e-commerce online, that's a much later phenomena. But malls had started declining and shutting down much before that phenomena actually overtook India with a wave.
Like any other business, I think mall is a business where unless until it's been planned well, unless until it's been leased out well, and like she talked about the experience part, it's not been run right. Even in the best of the environment, with or without e-commerce, some of the malls would have failed because they were badly designed or badly rented and badly managed. So like you rightly said, even before e-commerce that was happening, and maybe this has pushed some of the malls which could have been on the borderline cases, and they have been pushed towards failure. But when we say Mecca of shopping, I think from Mecca of shopping, like all the marketplaces or the Hearts or Som Bazaar, they used to be Mecca of shopping because that was the only option. People had to look at the wide variety of products and then get the best prices and compare things and all of that. So now the e-commerce is becoming another option where people are doing that. So malls as a place, but in e-commerce you cannot touch and feel the product, you cannot try out new things, you cannot have the overall experience of going out together with the family and eating out, entertainment, all of it. People will still come to the markets, and malls are the markets of future. So maybe not the shopping Mecca, but I think they are the Mecca for the brands to be present. No brand can seriously afford not to be in the offline world, not to be present in the physical form and be only present online and still be very, very successful. I think maybe the new generation 10, 15, 20 years later could have, if the malls simply start shutting down and they disappear and people will forget. There used to be malls, then there could be some brands which may get created only online. But otherwise, I don't see malls becoming irrelevant for any market, mall or any other market becoming irrelevant.
Okay,
in that
Kaushika
context.
Madhavan, I mean, as a retail expert, what do you think? I mean, do you think that this need to touch and feel is going to continue for a long time to come? Look at it globally. I mean, just take the US market. It's one of the most evolved markets, and probably the e-commerce or the online onslaught there has been far deeper and more meaningful than India. There is a serious distress when it comes to malls.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. In fact, if you have to kind of give some statistics on the extent of online sales that happens, US is probably between 10 to 15% of the total sales is online sales. I mean, putting it the other way, about 85 to 90% of sales still happen in physical stores. And they need to happen in different market contexts, malls being one of them. So even if you take US and UK and other developing countries being ahead of us by 10, 15 years in terms of e-commerce and omni-channel development, even those markets still have substantial share of sales happening through physical stores. That's a trend to keep in mind, which portends well to say that malls will have a future in India. The second point to keep in mind is even e-commerce organizations are seriously rethinking having a need for physical presence. I mean, you would have heard of Amazon starting its first physical stores. Bonobos, again a US retailer, is one of the more advanced in creating physical presence for what they call as touch and feel and trials and so on and so forth. And Alibaba recently acquired Suning in China. Again, trying to create a physical presence to complement their online sales. So these two trends portend well for malls. I mean, malls will have a place to hold the physical, maybe a trial or an experience touchpoint shop. The format or the role of a store might change, but the need for a store will exist, and hence by extrapolation, malls will be in business.
All right. Mr. Prabhakar, 6 malls in Bangalore, probably the youngest city of India, which catches all the latest trends, has perhaps the most users in terms of e-commerce and online. What has been your own experience? There is nobody who really comes out and says, look, I've actually seen a fall in footfalls in my malls. But honestly, what has been your experience in the last 18 months where you're really fighting a battle with online?
See, we have been in the mall business for last 5 years, and we have seen a transformation as far as mall business is concerned. There's an evolution which has happened the last 5 years. See, earlier it was only shopping, shopping and shopping. Today it is a lot more than shopping. It's the overall shopping experience. When I say overall shopping experience, shopping as far I see it is totally more than 5 verticals. One is shopping, which is the biggest vertical. Second is entertainment hub, your dining experience, your cinema experience, and overall a social and community hub. So unless all these factors are put together and all work together, integrated, only then we see a success in a mall. Mall is just not for shopping. But coming to the point what you mentioned, we have not seen any dearth in footfall or shortfall in the footfall as such into the mall. But there is a reduction in the transaction which is happening in the mall. So that is what we are working on now. But when we put all 5 elements together, I feel no, that is where people are looking at, just the consumer are looking at mall as a destination than just shopping.
Okay, so then what happens to the shops? You know, I'm going to throw this question to Kumar Rajagopalan. What happens to the shops? So here you have malls which are probably, if it's a well-run, well-managed mall, footfalls are not going down because there is the entire food and experience aspect of it and entertainment aspect of it. But what about the shops who really aren't doing that well?
I think the story of what happens to some malls which are not doing well is the same as the story of what happens to some shops which don't do well. Frankly, currently there is so much of competition that every single business entity has to prove itself to be able to stand in this competitive market. In the last 10 years, there has been an explosion of malls, there has been an explosion of channels, there has been an explosion of new brands and retailers. So some retailers will do well, some retailers will not do well. One of the things that's coming out very clearly is that retailers who know who they are, who know how to build their brands, and who are creating a clear touch point with the consumer are definitely growing. Even in this market, we hear of retailers who've grown 30%. We know that recently there were some international brands that got launched where customers just thronged into the store. 1/4 of the total merchandise was sold in a single day. So things like that are still happening. So I don't think it's a generic method here. It's not as if it's one retailer is not doing well in a mall means that the mall is not doing well or the other retailers need to get too worried. But I think coming to the question of malls, there has always been this worry about some malls being developed only as a developer's destination. They never had a care about what a real mall business was about. Many of them thought that merely constructing a physical infrastructure made a mall, which wasn't really the case. I think it was all about what happened post-construction of the mall that really segregated the good malls and the bad ones. Some of the mall developers, and I'd like to call them as mall promoters because they are not necessarily real estate developers, understand this business. And when they do understand, the mall does well. And in spite of a mall doing well, if a retailer doesn't do well, then there are serious questions to be asked. And thankfully, there are enough brands you can easily replace them. And I like what Pushpa said. Maybe if some of them don't do well, then one has to think about churning them and bringing new brands that do well. So there is a churn happening with retail. There is a churn happening as far as malls are concerned. And I think the new channels are also creating new experiences for consumers. So it's getting to become an interesting time. But it's never was that if a mall got constructed, it was successful. I think those statistics, if there were 100 malls, there were already some 70 malls which are not doing well. Now there are 600 malls, and there are equally the same kind of percentage that is there of people who don't do well. I think the mistake is in people who are developing a mall thinking it's a real estate business. It's more than that.
All right. So Sameer Jasuja, come in here. It's not a real estate business. Is that what we've proven? But yet, if you look at the largest malls which have been built in the country, they have been built by the biggies, isn't it? And those are real estate biggies.
Absolutely. 2 reasons for that. One is that these are the people who have cheaper land banks available to them. They have ways and wherewithal to be able to acquire prime land banks in prime areas where the malls could do really well. B, that from a development point of view, now developers are beginning to understand that they have to control the mall in terms of not selling spaces within the mall. Earlier it was a complete developer real estate play because the maximum per square footage return that you would get would be by building a mall, because retail spaces were so far and few that developers could easily sell them to HNIs and to investors who would want to work on a rental model. And India loves rental models, as we all can see. We've been crying hoarse about not buying pre-lease spaces in under construction buildings, but people go still and buy on assured returns. So I think that model really worked initially for the developer, and that's why we have a herd mentality. That's why you saw 600 malls coming up, because the return IRR that the developer got on creating malls and selling them, that was his business. Then later, people realized that the mall in itself was a business and not a real estate play. And that's why from the 600, only about 40 to 50 started to do well. And now many big developers such as DLF, the Select City Walk people have understood this business very well. And they're going about doing the right things and making their malls successful. And the other malls are failing and getting converted into, like you rightly said, office blocks and other such ways of monetizing the real estate.
Anand Sundar, my big question to ask here is that, you did see a lot of formats failing in the US. However, why did we still not learn? What really went wrong? I mean, okay, it started off as a real estate play, but even today it continues to be largely a real estate play, isn't it? Isn't that a fact, or something's fundamentally changed?
Well, it still is real estate play because they are still about malls. But it's much more than that. The malls have to be relevant to the catchment that they serve. And the retailers, the brands that the malls have, they have to be relevant. We can't just call it a real estate play and put in brands that the developers or promoters like. For example, we've not reached the evolved stage in the US where about a third of the electronics is sold online, or 50% of media content is sold online. We will reach there soon enough. The question is, have we in India made efforts to make sure that the brands are relevant to the catchment? One often sees a lot of international brands in catchments that would largely be Indian and ethnic. If 72% of a lady's wardrobe is ethnic and Indian, how many of these stores do you see in any standard mall? They're very few and far in between. And these are some very small, logical, practical pointers which unfortunately don't get followed in the malls that fail. Otherwise, it still is very much a play, yes.
So the way I see it, in the mall report of 2015, operational malls, they say, is 213. Total mall vacancy across 8 top cities is 14%, and malls shut down in the last 2 years is 25. This is a Cushman-Wakefield report which is talking about it. So just one question, Pushpa. You've got several malls. What does it take? I mean, I'm sure you felt pressure in some which haven't done so well, and some have done well. What has been the difference between the two?
Well, as Anand rightly put it, the key is to address to your catchment. So the right tenant mix which addresses to the catchment is the number one criteria. The other thing is that we learned 10 years back that selling a mall is not the way forward. So we lease our property, we own the property. So the control of the tenant mix is completely with us. And moreover, then what we do is we do not just lease it out and let the retailer run the show passively. We actively work with the retailers, and I think that's the key. Good developers actively work with the retailers to understand how can we improve their top line, what is it that we can do to address the audience, the catchment better, and how can we keep the interest alive. So there are various reasons why a good mall is a good mall, because the management in a mall business has to be much more hands-on. It is a service industry. It's not a real estate play. It's a service industry. And the sooner, mall developers realized it a few years back, and those developers have really created products which are appealing to audiences. Families like to go out there, find that the kind of food that's there is the kind of food that they'd like to eat without really drilling a hole in their wallet. So casual dining restaurants, great entertainment options, and a judicious tenant mix which is appealing to that catchment. These are the reasons why good malls remain good malls. But yes, the times are such that we do not have the luxury of waiting to see if a particular brand works endlessly. We have to take a call. If the brand is not working, we churn.
And you have the choice, Pushpa, today?
Yes, we do.
I mean, as I just heard from the other panelists, that look, So if a brand is not selling or a store is not selling, there's clearly something wrong with the brand in the store and not everybody else or the mall's fault.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
what we do is that we work actively with the brands. We try to make it work. And once it doesn't, then it's a friendly handshake on either side. And we quickly bring about another change. And that's what we have done. All our projects, be it DLF Promenade or Saket or now Mall of India, in terms of leasing percentages, we are all in high 90s. The reason why we are doing that is because we know that a quick churn is the way forward on one hand, and keeping some planned vacancies for fresh new brands which are around the corner is another way to ensure that the customers, when they come in the next season, they find another fresh new brand out there which will keep their interest live.
All right, and I'm hoping that India Growth Story will keep enough in the waiting line for all the good or well-worked or well-managed malls in India. All right, we're going to come back and touch that big question. We just superficially talked about it, online versus a mall. Well, online shopping is becoming a reality. I ask around, especially the youngsters, while people who are in their 40s and older, and of course that puts me in that category, want to touch and feel, the youngsters don't really feel that need. Let's accept it that this is something which is going to hit the malls and everything around us. So can online and mall work together to make a shopping more pleasurable? That's the big question. And how much will online really dent the mall business in India? We need to touch that. I mean, this is going to, it's a reality facing everybody, and it's, well, some say it's a tsunami. We beg to differ, but we'll come back and see where the battle lines are drawn.